first of all, the vision of our group was we set up about April last year. The idea was to look at making sure that as a manufacturing sector, we're involved in the BIM journey and that we're seen as leading internationally. So as you can imagine, most manufacturers have an international base, so making sure we lead on that front. In terms of groups, we're one of the BIM 4 communities. There's around 30 now. We're the one that supports product manufacturers from a screw to a whole chunk of a building. So we feed into the BIM 4 steering group, which goes through to the task group. We have 3 working groups: the data side, education, and promotions. So the first challenge was obviously figuring out, going through all the BIM wash and finding out what's really important in terms of BIM, and finding which direction we should be going, because that's usually the first question that we get asked from other manufacturers. You probably see the resemblance there as well on that one. So the first thing we did is talk to people through the other BIM 4 groups, through our own supply chains, to understand what we should be doing. And again, you get a lot of conflicting messages, so it's understanding what the ones are really important and then sharing those with the rest of the manufacturing community. We also did a survey, which I'll come on to, but the purpose of all that discussion and surveys was for us to get to the baseline of what's really important. Headlines of the survey: 40% of those are surveyed out of 200 respondents already provide BIM content. Another 50% will do by the end of 2015. So only 10% missing. And the good thing is we know the reasons why they've not yet invested or don't plan to. As I said, one thing from a manufacturing perspective is we tend to be international or export. So around 60% of those that responded export to different countries. So what that means is we need to make sure whatever we produce and create can be used across those different territories. The colours there are basically where there's a high level of implementation at the moment, or standards have been set. In the UK, they're again in response to the survey. You can see a number of different reasons why manufacturers have invested in BIM, from largely competitive advantage, but also client request. And what I tend to find is you go from no request to a lot of requests very quickly. On the right-hand side, is it a value? Then again, around 60% already said yes, it's been a value. In terms of what manufacturers are asked for, on the left-hand side there is how many times they've been asked for content. So the darker colours are where they're being asked regularly, and the light green and light grey is where they're being asked occasionally. And on the right-hand side, the type of information they're being asked for: structured data or BIM objects. So from the education group, first of all, we've concentrated on 3 key areas. Sifting through the BIM wash and saying this is the important sources of information for you to start with. The next one is developing a tool specific to each manufacturer to say, is BIM right for you? And then the final one, if it is, how do you go about developing a strategy? The first thing to consider is that it's a circular process. So you need to start to understand the value of your products right the way through the life cycle of a product and life cycle of an asset. So whether it's initial production or whether it's through identification and future warranties at the end there. In terms of guidance we produce then, the concentration is obviously in the manufacturing side and the specification side, that early stage. But we're certainly not taking our eye off the rest of that chain there, looking at facilities management, what's required and what the opportunities are. We've also graded the guidance that we give, whether it's crucial or whether it's just nice to have. The next one, in terms of is BIM for me, that obviously depends on a number of different factors, so including what type of product you have, is it a maintainable asset, your supply chain routes, which geographies you tend to work in, which sectors, and also what your competition is doing. All of those are important factors to consider. So the first tool that we've been developing, which will be launched soon, allows you to ask some of those questions based on evidence from a number of different surveys, and gives you a score out of 100 on that heat map. And it puts you into an initial category, so should you do something now, or can you wait kind of 6 months? But it also gives you specific guidance in more detail. The next thing there is, the next tool is to help you develop the business plan to convince those internally that it's worth investing. So the initial plan, how you deploy that based on your specific requirements and business strategies, and then how you review that on an ongoing basis. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. In terms of the data side, Matt will talk about that in a bit more detail soon. But the intention here is to get, again, the involvement of the whole supply chain to make sure we have an understanding of what data is required. The tool itself are free to use, they're multi-sector, project agnostic and geography agnostic. So a really good first stepping stone to the key requirements. So when we get to next year, 2016, we'll have made a massive achievement as a country to get to that level. So plenty of cheering going on, of course, but that certainly isn't the end of the story. That really is just the beginning. That gets us to the foothills of where we really need to be. So the next climb is going to be even tougher towards level 3, level 4, level 5. And they're just some of the areas that we need to start to look at. So real-time analytics instead of just by stage. Circular economy, again, looking at the real opportunities there and investment opportunities. And the big thing for me is the cultural shift between how we do things at the moment and how we're going to do things in the future. So those of you who've been following the industry last week, Vince Cable launched the level 3 strategy known as Digital Built Britain. Because it's such a huge piece of work and a huge stepping stone, which probably take 5 or 6 years, they've divided it into those 4 key categories. So improvements on level 2, through to new technologies, new business models, which will be a huge change, and so on. So beyond the standards, why else should we be doing this? This is taken from a McKinsey report, looking at the value of different technologies, disruptive technologies. And you can see all the processes that have the greatest economic impact are based on digital processes and exchange of information. This is just to show the technology is already here. So this is me driving a radio-controlled car just by reading my brainwaves. So some of this sounds far-fetched, some of the longer-term stuff, but actually the technology is already there in different sectors. You look scared now, but no, it's and that's it. Thank you.